So thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Our next session is called The Future of Work, Critical Skills for Business Leaders. And our panelists are as follows. Melanie Hughes, Chief Human Resources Officer for Moody's. Ara Ohanian, former CEO of Systech International. Jyoti Rai, Managing Director, Global Human Resources for Moody's. Mike Fawkes, Partner at Dubilier and Company. And Dr. Edwin Knox, Associate Professor and Academic Director, Online Business Programs here at SPS. The conversation will focus on what graduates can expect in the future of working in the business world. Dr. Knox will moderate the discussion.
Thank you, Carlos. Let me begin, and I'm just going to ask questions, and either of you who feel best suited to start that discussion can, and the remaining panelists can feel free to add to the discussion. Let's start with this first question. The U.S. labor market looks very different today than it did 2 decades ago. Certainly, we've gone through the Great Recession. We have some issues that we're confronted with today. What do you see that is changing the day-to-day nature in the future American and global workplace? What issues do you see?
Maybe I can kick off. I think the most obvious one, and I'm sure you've talked about it earlier today, is the advances in technology and artificial intelligence. And I think what I would like to do just at the beginning here is perhaps talk a little bit about a few stats and some data from a survey that Citrix did recently, where they asked leaders and professionals what they believe will happen by 2035. And I know that feels like a long time out in the future. However, these trends are already starting, and I think we have to be prepared for them. And when we educate people, we've got to be thinking about where we're going to be going in 10, 15 years' time. I think some interesting stats are that 83% believe that technology will automate all the low-value tasks, freeing workers to focus on more meaningful work. 77% believe that AI will significantly speed up decision-making processes, and actually will essentially do away with our modern leadership teams. So you won't have executive leadership teams anymore because they'll be better at decision-making. And 72% believe that AI will be more productive than humans and absorb more of the annual operating costs. And in fact, it'll be the biggest driver of growth for the organization. And that was by 2028. So that was within the next decade. So when you think about those trends, that informs the way we think about what's going to be happening to the skill sets for the future. And I think COVID has started to perhaps accelerate some of these changes because we've been working from home and using technology in different ways, and has given us the opportunity to think about where our workforce is set up, our geo workforce planning. Companies will go where the talent is. So where the best educated and the best skill sets are is where we will search for people. We're no longer looking for people who can attend our New York office, which has implications for online learning and people not coming to the major cities to learn. And I think things like whether companies are the 4 big tech companies, or whether we're a very distributed platform-based workforce, and how that evolves over the next few years will have some effect. So just a couple of starter thoughts.
Okay.
Right.
Others?
Edwin, this is Jyoti here. Maybe I can just build on a couple of facts that Melanie mentioned. She talked about in terms of how the skills, where work will be done is going to look very different. And also not just where work will be done, but how work will be done is going to look very different, because it's going to be, with the acceleration of digital innovation, the part, when you think about what work needs to be done by human and what work needs to be done by machines, that will create a lot of displacement in terms of, just the roles of the future. Looking at the World Economic Forum report itself, that by 2025, 85 million of the jobs will be displaced by a shift because of that shift between labor from human to machines. But at the same time, 97 million new roles will emerge. So that's one trend in terms of, just what kind of work will be done and how work will be done will be different. The other aspect is when you think about this other shift that we have seen in the recent, just not only in the recent years, is the rise of us focusing on from a diversity and inclusion, what our workforces are expecting, how that work, what they will look like as well. That composition of our workforce is shifting. And of course, in the last few months itself, we have seen a significant shift because, when we think about our workforce, there is the essential workforce, there is the displaced workforce, and there is the remote workforce. And that has created a lot of financial inequity in our societies. Just if I look at some stats, between just this year itself, 115 billion could fall back into extreme poverty. And that is going to push more and more companies in terms of from a disclosure, ESG disclosure, or the environment, social governance disclosures are becoming critical for the company. Mm-hmm. And that will force the companies to think about how they invest in making sure that the skills that they build is not just for a certain segment of employees, but also from a more diversity, how they make their workforce look more and more diverse. So that's another shift that we will see as we go forward.
Anyone else would like to go? Because there's an interesting point that you made about this automation and this displacement. How should then students prepare themselves for a future in which automation is going to be so prevalent? We're talking about displacement, but if we're talking to students and we're talking to people who are considering education, how should they prepare for that?
Ironically, as automation takes over more and more, the value of soft skills, I believe, become more and more important. Mm-hmm. There certainly will be jobs created around automation. My whole background is around technology, and for sure there are lots and lots of people working on developing technology and so on for automation. But I think for most people, ironically, the soft skills, because these are the skills that can't be replicated by automation and machines. And it is those soft skills. And I thought Ara did a really nice job of laying out some of the importance of those soft skills and some of those critical integrative skills, for example, and the ability to integrate across functions and system-wide thinking and things like that I believe are very difficult, will be very difficult, at least in the near term, from an automation standpoint. Mm-hmm. This question about what is the role of a human versus the role of a machine, I think is very critical, and increasingly a lot of that skill is soft skill. This is my own.
Yeah, I'd agree, Mike. And we've I think people who can apply human factors to technology and who have the ability to reason in a way that computers can't. So I think we're going to see a different skills mix for people studying things like philosophy and technology. How do you develop your critical reasoning skills that you can apply to technology and to artificial intelligence? So technology itself is going to be less of an interesting degree. But it's how you combine it. And psychology and business and technology, to Michael's point, understanding the way people work, and when it comes to sales, for example, that's not going to be easily converted into technology. people like to build relationships with sales and in a sales situation. And in order to build those relationships, you need to have those EQ softer skills. I just caught the last of the last presentation, and Ara did have a very nice slide on that. This agility and adaptability, and understanding what's coming next, and being able to think forward so that you can plan and ensure that the technology is adapted to those trends, because that's what technology and AI is not going to be great at for quite a while. So I would say all of those elements are something that, in the education system, we would love to be able to tap into students who are coming out with those kind of mixture of degrees that aren't just pure technologists.
Right. Okay. Well,
and
I'm sorry.
there was one. It's an older example, but I think this one could still be very valid. Before AI, there was already some automation, and the product Johnny Walker had was #1 whiskey that's sold in Japan, and most products, it's not easy to enter Japanese market. And through a left brain activity driven decision, every model showed that because they have such a high market presence, brand and so on, that it makes sense to sell more units. And by discounting the price a little bit and go broader, that they were going to get a lot more market share. But this is a good example. All that data pointed, they did that, and Johnny Walker altogether lost his position in Japan because the systems could not take into consideration that the gift-giving tradition that happens twice a year in Japan goes against all of those. And and these are the kind of things, as we project, we'll see automated decisions that come out, but for a long time to be, at least while we're alive, I think that nuance will have to be done by kept in leaders' hands, and those are still human for a while.
So for all of our audience that is listening to this, and I'm wondering if they have the same concern I have, if we're speaking just simply of soft skills, and I hear the sales component to it, and making, because it's something that an automated, like robotic sort of process would be difficult for. Are there other roles that humans would do better than robots, or will have to do in light of automation, outside of just simply the sales? It just sounds like we talk about a lot of soft skills, and that's perfect. But would there be other tangible roles that folks would be needed, or roles that they are better at doing than computers?
I think what we're going to see, Dr. Knox, is many roles being assisted by technology, initially at least. And you think about going to the doctors, for example. Having there are certain sets of symptoms, etc., that can be automatically diagnosed, and so you can have AI or technology assisted medical advances. So now doctors to then do what we do best, which is applying the nuances at the kind of at the edges, instead of having to know and deal with every single situation. If the easy situations are taken care of by a computerized solution, then you're dealing with kind of the tail ends of the distribution, if you like. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. So roles that are aided by technology, which means we've just got to be a little bit more sophisticated about how we apply that technology and use our, using our judgment at the tail ends of that. So I think many jobs will just get, need a little bit more reasoning, as I said earlier. But I think there are roles which, where people are just spreading data into different spreadsheets or doing that kind of manual work. Those roles will go away, but other more sophisticated ways of treating the data and looking at it are going to be created. And I think it's, how do we shift people's skill sets from, those roles of today where they're perhaps doing the more manual work that will be automated, to the more reasoning work. And I think that's where, we will have, we in business are going to want to have a much closer relationship with universities, because we're going to want to make sure that we can re-educate and reskill our workforce in a way that we've never had to do before. To me, that's going to be perhaps the most significant difference to the education system that we will have seen for a very long time.
Let me sort of build on what you're saying, Melanie. Laura talked a little bit about creativity as one of the critical soft skills. And I think the type of creativity that we think about in the future is a little bit different. And it is that application, I'll call it application engineering, but that's too technical of a term, but it is figuring out how to use technology to solve problems. And I'm an investor, private equity and venture capital. And if you look at where most of the money is going these days, it is in solutions, and it is using technology to create solutions. And so that creativity, it's a different kind of creativity than we probably had in the past, but it is very much about using technology as a part of that solution. Ara and I are on a board together right now, and the whole basis of this company is using technology to solve what is a really old problem, accounting. But we are using technology as a way to do that. And there's a lot of old problems. The problems aren't different. And I don't think the problems are changing all that much, but the solution set is changing a lot. And so this is one area where I think there is a huge future for people, but it requires a different kind of thinking, because most of these are system problems. They're not like bits and bytes problems. They are figuring out how to solve business and other types of problems. And so it's a different kind of creativity than we probably had in the past.
And Mike, if I may just build on, when you think about creativity, it is also around the experience that you need to provide. The customer expectations are shifting, and so is our employee expectations are shifting. And when we think about the customer experience, there is so much of investments around. All the marketers, all the salespeople are shifting from just not customer engagement, but providing a holistic experience. And what is that experience that you need to think through so that the customers are not just engaged with you, but the customers are meaningfully spending with you as well. And similarly, even for employees in the organization, all that effort, whether it is from an HR standpoint, from the leadership, is about how do we think about not just employee engagement, but also the experience. And what are the solutions, if I may just connect back to Mike, just what you said, what are the solutions? What are the shifts that we need to understand? So to understand that expectation shifts so that we can create a right experience, which helps us get the best out of our employees, gets the best out of our people. And those insights can never be automated. It is the people who will understand through the relationships. It'll be understanding through the social expectations. It'll understand through, the consumer expectations as well, that people will need to think through. And those roles will emerge more and more. Yes, they will be aided by all the technology tools, and those technology tools will continue to change. But that experiences that we build for our people, whether they are customers, whether they are stakeholders, whether they are employees, will need to, those things will continue to evolve around the human interaction.
I heard in one of the responses the issue of solution driven and sort of the soft skills and that sort. There is a question that was in the chat that came from one of the instructors here, David Leventhal, who wanted to know, are you all arguing now in favor of more liberal arts education tied to business education?
I would say yes.
Yes, absolutely. It's a new way of teaching business, right? If you look at the business evolution, at the beginning, you have expertise in certain things. And as those become almost like a commodity we're all used to, there's more time to be creative, right? So there's more time for people to get together, different points of view to get together, but also harness them. So the individuals that are good at helping setting up the right goals, bringing ideas, creating dissonance, so that out of dissonance something comes out that maybe wouldn't have logically been thought of at the beginning. And those are the kind of things that will drive that next level result and process. So in a way, if the machines don't take over, all they do, they become the best servants we've ever had to really be ourselves, humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the answer, yes, with a resounding yes to your question.
I'd say it in a slightly different way, maybe. If I were running a business school, for example, I don't think about it in terms of liberal arts or whatever compared to business. I do think business schools, though, as an MBA myself, I think business schools need to be teaching those soft skills and do a lot more work and education around that, because for the most part, business schools teach hard skills: how to be a good accountant, how to be a good marketer, and I think these soft skills become increasingly important. And so to the extent you can bring soft skills, bring in some of that sort of global thinking and some of that liberal thinking that you're talking about into the business education and the business curriculum, I think is going to be very important. And I know you guys are doing that, but I think it becomes even more important going forward.
Absolutely.
I would love to echo that. I mean, I went to business school now 30 years ago, which probably gives away my age a little. And when I was actually the only person in my business school that came from an HR background. People said to me, "So why are you doing an MBA, Melanie? You know, you're in HR." And you know, and when I got over being completely insulted, I then said, you know, I think this is you know, a very important part of what we do. And everybody, you know, went towards the finance courses and the economics and the, you know, and they thought the organizational behavior class was kind of the easy class that they could, you know, that they could kind of get an A in quite easily. And the dean said, you know, at the end of he actually introduced the OB class. He said, you know, as you get more senior in organizations, this is the only class that really matters. Because all of the other classes become technical skills that can be done, you know, but you gain wisdom through dealing with people. And, you know, it's one of the hardest skills to perfect. And, you know, as a leader, that's probably 90% of what you're going to be doing. You know, if you look at Jack Welch, it's what he used to say all of the time. And, you know, and I find with MBAs that come out, they're great with spreadsheets, they're great at doing this work, but they need some considerable maturing, if you like, in order to take on leadership positions. And that's, again, what we're talking a little bit about here is if this other work, you know, the spreadsheet work can be done by automation, you want somebody who's got a balance of skills who can lead. Why are you paying MBAs a premium if you're not? They don't have these other skill sets.
You know, when I think I think a lot of the students at your university there are part-time students, right? They have full-time jobs and things like that. And when I think about most careers, your first promotion oftentimes is call it a technical promotion because you're a really good accountant or a really good engineer or a really good something. But your second, third, fourth, and other promotions are usually because you have better soft skills, you're able to integrate better, you're able to take the sort of the big picture stuff that Ara talked about. So it's an interesting thing, I think, for you guys, because you're not usually dealing with 20-year-olds who are thinking about their first promotion and you're training them for their first promotion. You're probably training people for their second, third, fourth promotion, which I think is a lot more of these sorts of soft skills that we've been talking about today.
And another aspect when we think about soft skills, hard skill, is all of us have that responsibility, including the business schools, around how do we help our people become active learners. there is, because given that skill shift will happen so fast, whether it is the soft skills, which will continue, we will need to continue to think about critical thinking, or in terms of, creativity, all those aspects. But because the technology behind us, the tools that we need to use with us will constantly evolve. And how do we integrate that better? We will have to become much more active learner. And today, how do we help students, our people, on making sure that they are, when they think about self-management skills, those self-management skills are around flexibility, around becoming learners, becoming more resilient, and those aspects that we will have to teach our students more and more, so that they have, when they think about themselves, they are able to move in a much more agile way, and they are able to constantly think about, this is investment in myself. The constant learning is an investment in myself, just the way I think about any of my other health aspects for myself.
Okay, there's another question, and I think this question is probably what everyone is trying to get a real appreciation of. As we talk about the soft skills, and certainly moving up within organizations, you're going to have more responsibilities for leading and sort of groups and of people. But the concern is, would this mean that there is no longer the subject matter expert? The way that we see it today when someone studies finance or studies marketing or studies accounting in a sort of deep way, the way that most business programs are currently set up. Does that mean there is some sort of elimination for those type of people in organizations?
I referred to it in the presentation, but I think the way to look at it is, the answer is no. You always need to be good at something, right? But what we're saying, so let's say if I'm good at counting, and as a result, that's one of the things we're saying, that I need to be now good at more than counting. I think that's what we're saying. I won't be able to progress just this accounting career and go to the, it will plateau faster as a single trick horse. And as a result, we need to bring those other tricks, that because it's the, as more and more of the systems automate some of the processes and take what were solutions that people needed to bring about, that they become routine enough for systems to do them. It's about the coordination of other people's effort with yours, but it's like a team. I may have a really great right foot, so I'll still be on the right wing. But I need to be able to make sure to play well with all the other ones. So I need to understand what they're doing. I think I would put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
We call it T-shaped, which is, you've got a kind of narrow expertise that goes very deep, and then you've got a breadth of expertise that goes across the top. And you got to have a little bit of both. You got to have your T-shape, and as you get further up in your career, when you're more junior in your career, that depth of expertise is what gets you further along. As you progress in your career, it's kind of broadening your T-shape and making and developing those skills that is what gets you to that next level of your career, and how you can bring together all of those other skills to be able to influence your deep area of expertise. So it's kind of important to have both. I would agree with Ara 100%.
There's a question in the chat, but I'm going to ask another question that's sort of tied to it. What is the role then of industry with education? How does that relationship look?
Jyoti, do you want to take this?
I can take that. I think there is a need for a greater partnership between the corporates as well as the education part, only because there is a mutual need for both the organizations. There is a need, when I think about just the reskilling that is happening across the globe, and there is the shift of jobs which is happening. there is for us to be able to think about what is the talent pipeline that is going to emerge in the future. There is a need for the corporates to work with schools and with the education to be able to help them better in terms of redesigning and rethinking their curriculum, as well as thinking about these investments that companies are making more and more for their own people on this reskilling.
So if I can add to that a little bit, in your chat, I just noticed somebody talking about Google putting together their own program. And, I think Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, the kind of the really big tech giants can afford to do that because they've got the cash flow and and some of the expertise to be able to do that. I mean, and they can afford to buy good professors, for example, and put courses together. But that's not an option for most companies. But we still have a need, and I think the need is twofold. One is having people come out of college well prepared for the world, not just an expert in one topic, and not the ability to work with others, for example. But there's a second need, which we touched on a little bit earlier, which is about this reskilling of the workforce and thinking about, as we progress with AI and technology, we're going to want to have that lifelong learning opportunity and be able to work with you. So in some ways, I think it's the biggest opportunity for universities that there's ever been, right? Which is your potential universe of clients just got a bit bigger or a lot bigger. And so I think reaching out to companies and saying, okay, what do you think in the next 5 years? Because it may not be immediate that we're seeing this right now, but in the next 5 years, how can we partner with you to develop the courses, to train the people that you already have to do the roles that are going to be required as their roles go away? Because we can't just jettison all these employees and expect to be able to go out into the marketplace and get all the skills we need, because they're just not there. Everybody's after the same skill sets, the data scientists, these people who have the ability to think around technology and use it in different ways, the data manipulators. We need people like that, and there just aren't enough of them. And the people who've got these skill sets today that are slowly being eroded by technology are not going to have roles. And from a societal standpoint, I think jointly we'd love to be able to partner with you to do something about that.
Let's talk a little bit about this issue of remote workers. How do they sort of weigh in now? COVID has certainly shifted a lot of people to the online experience, working remotely. When we look at the workforce in the future, how does that play in?
So I can share with you our experience. I can say that, in COVID in many ways has been a myth buster, because many companies thought that virtual or working remote is never going to be for the majority of the people. It is going to be only for a small section of employees. And there were many myths in many organizations, including technology organizations, that if you have to grow senior in the organization, then you have to be present in office, you have to be there with people, which of course, yes, you have to be there with people and you have to be there with your teams. But at the same time, if I just look at our own experience, we moved overnight globally to remote. Now that is in terms of, just I would say a big part of in terms of the capability that we had as from a technology standpoint as an organization, the kind of work that we did as an organization enabled us to move overnight fully remote. And now it's been almost 10 months that we have been working remote, and everything, whether it is from a quarter closing to the company results to everything we have been doing fully remote. We haven't seen a loss on productivity. In fact, the year that we have seen has been extremely busy in terms of just the volume of work, and that speaks to our results as well. So in spite of all of that, we have been highly productive. Our employees have been highly engaged. We have done now, just in the last 10 months or so, we have done 3 surveys with our employees to understand what their engagement looks like, what their well-being is, and how do we continue to understand their well-being, and how do we continue to adapt our solutions to support our employees better. And today, 10 months in, we are absolutely, we have engaged employees. Our employees, what we are hearing from our employees, and what we also did surveys to understand what do they want in the future, and how do they think about work, how do we think about our workplace in the future. While it is difficult to think about, just in the middle of pandemic, to think about way out in the future, but what we are hearing from our employees is almost 90% of our employees want greater flexibility, which means, and there is almost 40% of our employees want to be fully remote. There is another 50% of our employees want greater flexibility, which means coming into office 1 to 2 days in office. And that tells us that we have to rethink completely in terms of how people will learn, how people will collaborate, when will they come into office, what is the relationship with our office going to look like. So that is something that we have to find new solutions to it. But clearly, what we know now is that we will have a more distributed workforce. Melanie touched on in terms of the geolocation, where work will, where we will do our work is based on where talent and skills are. Not necessary that you have to be in the headquarter, but those skills, roles can be done in a much more different locations, and that will give us better access to more diverse talent. That will give us access to more skills, and it'll help us from an employer standpoint, our responsibility towards our employees to think about their well-being as well, that we will be able to support them from their well-being as well. So, if you think about the silver linings in all this, is that the silver lining is that it has completely disrupted the way we need to think about workplaces in the future.
I'll take a little longer viewpoint on this. In the early 2000s, I ran worldwide manufacturing and operations for Hewlett Packard. And so we had manufacturing organizations all over the world, some inside of Hewlett Packard, many times they were third parties. We moved all of our customer support to India and places like that. And so all of the people that worked for me, all of a sudden, all that stuff that used to be done in the same building that they worked in was being done all over the world. And that caused that was sort of the first change in terms of managing a virtual organization and having virtual relationships with people. I will tell you, I'm envious of all these technologies. Like right now we're on Zoom. I would have loved to have had Zoom 15 years ago in the work we were doing. It would have made those jobs much easier. But people had to learn how to work virtually. But I will say the one thing that we found in that world, we still had to get people together a couple times a year, 2 or 3 or 4 times a year. Even if you're working with, with India and China and Mexico and all the other places, it was important to have face-to-face relationships from time to time. And it's one of my concerns that we can't. I think human relationships do require at times in-person meetings and drinking or whatever, but social time together to get to know each other. And I have found it's hard to replicate all of that. It is interesting. I'm on the board of a lighting company in Los Angeles right now. And in July, we went back to work. We gave all of our employees the option of going back to work for a couple of days a week. But we gave them the option of staying at home. Every employee came back to work. And we said, you don't have to come back to work. You can stay at home. And I don't know if they were sick of their spouses or their children or what, but they all they all chose to come back to work at least a couple of days a week. And I think that's a human need, is to have that sort of personal interaction. And so, to what they were talking about before, it's going to be a hybrid. I don't think, people will probably work in the office all the time, but there's going to be some sort of hybrid working, I believe, in the future. And I think that need for social experience, in-person social experience, will continue. It is so human.
I think if I can just say, our CEO was incredibly concerned that our culture as an organization is getting diluted, and if you don't have people gathering together and interacting in a certain way, your values and the culture of the way you work together, and the transparency of people and the relationships that you build all suffer. And he talks about it as, we have a bank of culture, and right now we're drawing down on that. And at some point, we've got to refill it. And this refilling is only going to happen when we can get back into the office together. It was kind of very visual, and I think he's right. You can have, you can work very well for certain periods of time or on certain tasks, but there's no substitute for building those relationships in person.
With that, I want to follow.
You might remember many years ago when Marissa Mayer took over Yahoo, and she made what I think was at one level a courageous thing about, she was going to allow and encourage at-home work, and it was particularly around working moms, to allow them to sort of have it all, as it were, and it turned out to be sort of a failure. It didn't work very well, and in fact, after about 3 or 4 years, Yahoo completely turned and said everybody had to come into the office, because and it was from two sides. One, from the company's side, that the creativity went down, and particularly when you're in a creative business and developing things, there's those sort of moments where creativity happens.
And
you plan to manage. And from the other side, the employees at Yahoo found out they didn't really like working at home full time all the time. They missed the human interaction. And so it was interesting. It ended up being not a very good solution for either the company or the employees. And I think that's one of the things. I really agree with Melanie. I'm hearing this from several of the companies that I'm on the boards of. These existing relationships that people have, they can continue to draw on those relationships because they created those relationships pre-COVID. I really feel for new employees these days, like people that when their first job and they're just getting the first job and they haven't even met in person any of their fellow employees. I don't know how the hell that works, because I completely agree with Melanie about sort of drawing down on those the sort of the savings account, if you will, of emotional relationships. And so I completely agree about having to make new deposits into those accounts.
And Mike, I agree with you here. And the opportunity here is that we don't swing either side of the pendulum. Because where we have been companies which have been completely restricted on the flexibility to completely going remote, we have to find that good medium for our employees, for us, for everybody, so that when they are coming into office, they are not coming in to just sit in front of the computer and creating work products, but they are coming into office for meaningful interaction. And how do we curate those experiences? And how do we bring those experiences to encourage people to come into office?
Especially with creativity.
That's the opportunity for us, which is what we have been now thoughtfully thinking through. And you touched on a very important aspect around new employees. Or if we think about the personas of our employees, whether it is new employees or even old employees, or we think about diverse employees where the need for engagement may be different. How do we put our arms around each of those, understand those personas of employees, and put our arms around those and look at their needs and create solutions for each of those employee base that we have.
I think also it's the dividing up what you do and also retraining people. What do you do when you're in an office with your colleagues, and what do you do when you're at home? And
Yeah.
so you really, when you're in the office, you're there to collaborate, innovate, create, develop people, and creating a space, a physical space that allows you to do that effectively. And when you're at home, you're really there to kind of put your head down and do the things that you don't require others to do, and that does make people more productive. And that's why they've enjoyed, they've got some enjoyment out of this, which is I'm not kind of getting caught at the coffee machine every day, or I don't have my commute, and so there is it's going to be retraining people about the way they work and how they interact and when they interact, and creating teams that come together, do this kind of collaborative work, and then break apart and do their own. And that's going to be a little bit different for us.
Also, if you think there's the big things and little things, right? So, for instance, I've been on a number of Zooms for board meetings, for a variety of things, and since I also ran a global virtual organization when I was at Infor, we were already doing that years ago, except that the tools were a little bit clumsy, or the bandwidth was a little bit more of an issue. But there's when you read about Churchill and you see his perspective. There's a great book called Dinner with Churchill, and it's all of the different dinners and lunches that he personally organized, thought about everything that was heard, because he said all the big discussions, the big problem solving, and the big breakouts don't happen at the office. They don't happen when you're meeting. They happen somewhere social. And I think you can't take the social animal out of the person. So I think if we put things in two areas, there's going to be all the ant work we need to do anyway, and we'll do those, and lower level collaboration that we need to get going. But I just think the last time that I had a team and I flew them to Bali for 5 days, and we sat down and we had a great time. We left with some ideas that's frankly, I'm sure we wouldn't have got out of Zoom. So the issue is that, but at the same time, during the time, I remember I used to go see expense accounts, and there were some of the executives on my team. I used to call them mileage whores. And all they cared about was how many miles and what status they have on the thing. And they were creating absolutely unnecessary travel. So I think that kind of stuff's going to go away. So we can refocus and really spend the right time for the right social events that are very human oriented. And some of the routine work, we can really don't have to put that big environment for.
Let me sort of jump in here. And this is a great discussion. But I want to expand it to this issue of the global workforce. How does that weigh in, and what are your thoughts about how it weighs in the education process as we see ourselves online? It doesn't restrict us by boundaries of brick and mortar or national lines. Talk a little bit about the globalization of the workforce and what educators should be considering as they educate the next group of leaders. Did I lose everyone?
No, I'll kick off. I think from I think COVID has really made us rethink everything about that, the way we get work done. And really rethink, where is the best place to go for talent to get things done? And in this environment, we've been finding it hard to get people like data scientists, for example. We know that there's a great team of data scientists in Lithuania, and we've got a small office there, and even for my HR data scientists, to do analytics, normally I would never have thought of having somebody outside of New York. I want that person there, where I can go talk to them. And Lithuania, that's 7 hours away in terms of time zone. But the skills are fantastic there. There's just a great supply of talent. It happens to be about half the price or less than here. And so that's where I'm going to replace the skill sets that we need there. And so if we have that kind of flexibility, these online courses where people from all over the country can study, it actually opens up the employment market both for us as employers and for your students who are not in major urban areas where they would need to come to an office every single day. And so I think it's really opened up the labor market massively, both internationally but also nationally. So if you're living somewhere that perhaps you need to be near a parent or whatever, and you can't move to a major urban center, if your skill set is one that people require, that's great. We're looking to downsize our footprint in New York because it's the most expensive, or one of the most expensive cities in the world. And if we can get those skill sets, at a even if it's the same price, we're not paying for real estate in Seven World Trade Center, which I can tell you is not inexpensive. It's a better business model for us. And so COVID has helped us really realize that we can do that. I think the challenge we still have to overcome is to make sure that we get people to come to one of our major centers, maybe once a month or something like that, to ensure that we are getting the experiences that we just talked about. But I believe it's totally opened up the employment market for both us as employers and for your students who are looking to get jobs, that may not be available in their local marketplace.
I want to, there's one question, I think maybe we've touched on it, but I'll ask it. And this is from Dr. Jofoy. When a prospective student graduate comes into the workforce boasting that they can work remotely, what remote skills, hard or soft, will be viewed as most valuable?
Whether we're working remotely or working in person, networking is an incredibly important skill. And networking can be internal networking, working on teams, cross disciplines, working up and down an organization, and so on. And so how you network, I think networking is important no matter where you work. But I think it's an extra challenge that one has to work for when they're working remotely. It's very easy to get out of touch, I think, when you're working remotely, because all those sort of accidental things don't happen as well, where you're just come across people at the water cooler or whatever. And so I think you have to work very hard at networking when you are working virtually and reach out to people. That means you have to be much more, I think, disciplined about networking. And I think it is one of the most important skills that we have. When I think about the successful people I've worked with, it was that they were so good at reaching out and working across the organization. But I just think it's much more difficult when you're working virtually and by yourself at home.
Well, this has been a very good conversation. We are going to get prepared for the next session, and they will raise that up, what that session is. But I will tell you, you answered a question for me, and I think two of my colleagues are here had written to me with some concern of group projects. And I think you've kind of answered it without me having to write back to them, and they know who they are. And they'll get a note following this conference that yes, the group projects are still important, although that we are working remotely. So let me thank each of you as panelists. We certainly have grown from this discussion. There's a lot that we will take away as educators. We do understand the need to work with our corporate counterparts, not in a competitive way, but in a way that actually delivers what is necessary to the marketplace. For those who have participated, the participants, thank you for your questions. I hope that you've enjoyed this session, and I hope that you will stick around for the next session, which starts in 4 minutes. Again, thank you.